And we are live. It's our pre-show. We are 10 minutes away from starting our live stream. But we usually get things started about 10 minutes early. Well, 9 minutes early because this is my day. And then I am going through and making sure that we are recording, which you can see on the bottom right here. We certainly are. You can see my Cylons going there. We are streaming and looking at the streaming stats. You can see I just started where we went from 0% down to 3%. Which is where we normally are. We're good. Sending about 6 megabits per second to YouTube. YouTube is churning that together and sending you a completely different stream than what I am sending them, interestingly enough. So you never are actually getting a direct stream from me. You're always getting a direct stream from YouTube, and they are customizing it to fit the type of device that you happen to be watching and the configuration that you've set on that device. So if you're watching this on a mobile device, it's probably sending you 720p. If you're watching, and you could of course change that. You hit the cog wheel at the bottom, you can change it to a lower resolution. And that's how they're able to do that. That's how they're able to make all of that happen. But thank you for being here, everyone. Today is our Network Plus study group, our very first Network Plus study group of the year. So it's so good to be in 2025 at this point. I like the beginning of the year. It kicks things off. People are interested in getting their certifications, and we're more than happy to have these live streams and have a little bit of fun while we're doing it. So, of course, we have all questions and answers for you today. I have up on the screen, we have our map. So if you wanted to put a virtual pin in the map, describing where you happen to be in the world, that's a nice thing that we can all see and get an idea of where people are connecting from, which is kind of fun. Once the pre-show is over, that will change to a completely different Q&A, and you can use the link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, which I probably won't ever see again for the next hour. That is the link that you can use to not only put your virtual pin in our map, our pin cushion map, but you can also leave it on that link to answer questions later. Hey, chat room, how's everyone doing? Hope everybody's doing okay. We all made it through the new year. Now, is it too late in January to say Happy New Year? Because I feel like we should still be saying that to people we haven't seen since December. So I'm still doing it. I'm not sure. I guess it will organically fade away. It'll stop happening in just a bit. But I did it even again this week. We will see. We've got a lot to go through today. Of course, all new questions from the Network Plus exam. So we've got those all ready to go. Look at folks putting their pins into the map. Lots of folks checking in. Plenty of folks. A lot in North America. There's some Canadians up there, up on that little piece of the polygon up there. Got some folks in Central America. Actually, Mexico looks like. I'm seeing nothing quite yet in Central America. Got some folks. Oh, Havana's checking in. Isn't that where Havana is? I'm not really sure about my Cuban my Cuban geography. I need to work on that just a little bit. And of course, you can put whatever you'd like, wherever you'd like on this. So we'll have to see. Is it down in Jamaica? Yeah, maybe it is a dot. Oh yeah, they did get it right there. Sort of in the middle, isn't it? Sort of at more like Grand Cayman, somewhere down there. Anyway. I try to get it just right. Thank you, chat room, for correcting me on the locations of where everything happens to be. I'm much better with computers, thankfully, than I am with my geography. And thus here we are. This is how things worked out for me. Thank goodness there's now Google Maps. that has gotten me through quite a bit over the last 10 years or so. Prior to that, I remember driving around with a map. They used to, stay with me here, we used to print maps on paper, and we would carry it around with us everywhere we went. We would have books that had a binding in it that you could use to flip to the page really close for all of that. So there you go. That's what we're doing. Yeah, the map books. When I was in South Florida, that was an important book to have with me so that I could find the right square off Lejeune on coming close to, Coral Gables. Where are they? What is the address? Triangulate. There they are. And then figure out a way to get there. I was my own Google map. Google map. It was really, yeah, we used to print the MapQuest. I do recall that because there was really no good way to reference the maps when you were in your car. You could do it on your computer. We didn't have iPhones. iPhones didn't exist. The best we had was BlackBerry. What was the T-Mobile, the Sidekick? You know, those were at least a little more graphical than some of the older ones. Palm Pilots were good, but they didn't really have wireless or internet connectivity. That was the problem. But we certainly, I certainly made that the BlackBerry maps. They were pretty awful. They were pretty awful. They were, which is why we didn't use them. We just printed out MapQuest and we went with it. We searched for it on Alta Vista and printed it out on MapQuest. It was simple. It was an easier time. We're so happy with that. Now, though, it's so great because now we can simply find out where we need to go and plug it all in. Lots of folks checking in. Thanks for being here, everyone. We'll get started here in 3 minutes. We just saw the number go back and forth. Get there. Oh, I remember the Engage. That was a good idea that just didn't really happen, did it? Now, of course, we've got Waze. You're driving down the road. It tells you if something's in the road. You've got this crowdsourcing that you can do, which is just remarkable. It is so awesome to be able to use that and be able to bring those things up. So I think it's fantastic. We're going to keep going with the Network Plus. By the way, Network Plus today, we've got in the first hour Q&A. Stick around for the second hour. I will be taking your questions. I need to make sure that I popped up the Q&A info. I did. So looking over my shoulder there to see how we manage this thing. So you can, of course, go and look at the Q&A that is there as well, the top of your screen from that same link. You can submit a question at any time from professormesser.com/QA right at the top of the screen. Am I streaming on a different platform as well? I am not. We are only streaming on YouTube at the moment. Maybe in the future we'll consider, but YouTube tends to be the one that most people can connect to. I haven't really had any problems, but if you have any recommendations, thoughts, ideas, comments, suggestions, I'm more than happy to take them. You can always email us at our contact us link at the website. So that might help you if you get into the details of this. I think that might even get us to where we need to be. Get us a little more info. And if we need to be there, we can be there. Twitch just doesn't seem to be a good fit. There's no gaming going on here. And I realize there's more on Twitch than gaming, but not much more. That's not really what the platform is for. So that's why we've really never gone there. I love Twitch. I like watching things on Twitch. I like interacting on Twitch, but it's just not our thing. It's just not really made for us. So I don't tend to do that. And YouTube has just been so great to us for many different reasons. It's been a great platform. It's worked very reliably. They have invested quite a bit in their live stream info. I have a YouTube representative. In fact, I have a meeting with them this week. So there's great things happening on the YouTube side. I've just not seen any compelling reason to get to another platform, but I'm always open for suggestions. We did indeed look at Twitch, and it just was not quite the right fit for what we were trying to do. Whenever we get to a point where I want to just change the whole direction of the company, and now we're only going to do game streaming, okay, I'll go over there. That makes sense. But I think YouTube works pretty well for us right now. Oh, let's see. CTS says, thanks for helping me pass the 1101 last week. Looking to take the 1102 by the end of the month. Congratulations on your Core 1. So we get there. Do I record in ProRes? The recorders that I use, you can't really see them right now. Let me get rid of my lower third there. The recorders down here are Blackmagic recorders, and they do record natively at ProRes and a number of different ProRes settings. But I just do standard ProRes. It's just easier. So yes, I do record in ProRes. But I have other options. We can record other ways too. Let's get our info up on the stream help where I usually like to keep it. That's good. And that works pretty well. But obviously it's not on my Mac. That's just a separate third-party recorder, and that happens to be the codec that I use for that. But almost any codec would work fine for what we're doing. other than maybe something compressed. So we are at the top of the hour. I've been talking about ProRes for here 60 seconds, and that is a waste of our time. Let's get started on the live stream, everybody. Let me see if I can get my act together. That may be easier said than done. Let's do a live stream, everybody. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the January 2025 Professor Messer N10-009 Network Plus Study Group. This is the study group where I will ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And you, as you sit there live and online with us, can actively, interactively answer the questions along with all the rest of us. And then we'll get to see just how well we did with answering those questions. Thanks for joining us. We have so much to go through today. One of the things that we have been working on here is getting new equipment, a new live stream setup. For you, it just looks normal. If you've been on our live streams before, there's really not much that's changed here. We have been working on making sure that we can give you the best quality video, the best quality audio, and over the holiday season, I just swapped everything out. So we've had 2 great live streams already this year. So I expect we'll have some more coming up here also very soon. If you are here live with us, please join in. One of the ways you can do that is to join in at the link that you see on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can, of course, join us there. We have a lot of other things we're doing from that same link. So once you go to that link, you're good. Just go to professormesser.com/QA. Now, if you do that, there will be a question waiting for you on that screen. I say that because I'm in the process of putting that question up. Here's one of the questions that we will see if you go to that link. This is one from last month. So this is one that hopefully you remember. We're using this as what I like to call a rewind question to see if we can remember what the answer was. Now, of course, when we are working on this live stream content, when we're here live, one of the things that I would like you to do is to always think about everyone else. And one of the ways we do that is to please do not put the answers on the chat room. Please don't put any hints into the chat room. Instead, use the link on your screen to answer. If you're not there already, pop open a new browser window and head over to professormesser.com/QA. The question this week, as our rewind question asks, a network engineer would like to prevent client disassociation attacks. Which of the following would be the best option? Would it be to require HTTPS for all web communication, use a VPN to connect remote sites, enable 802.1x on all switches, enable personal firewalls on all devices, or upgrade all access points to a newer standard? So have a look at that question. If you're in the process of looking through that question, there's the link you can use to be able to answer that question. Simply pop open a new browser window and visit professormesser.com/QA. We will come back to this question in just a moment. Well, thank you for being here. One of the things that we do are live streams and study groups during the month. We have 2 for A+, we have a Network Plus, and of course next week is our Security Plus study group. But of course we have other things going on at the same time. If you would like to join us over on YouTube, that's where we keep all of our training classes. You can watch any video from any of our training courses for free on the YouTube or on our website with our website video index pages that are there at professormesser.com. You may want to subscribe to the YouTube channel because we do have these live streams and other things that you could be informed about. It's a great thing to subscribe and hit the bell so that you can be proactively notified when we go live. We also have a weekly Network Plus pop quiz question. One of the things you can do is go to Twitter, professormesser.com/Twitter and professormesser.com/Instagram. You can use both of those to be able to see the weekly Network Plus question, or I can email it to you directly. You can always sign up on the Professor Messer website for something like that. We have a lot of information about Network Plus to go through today, but everything that we will be talking about are from the latest exam. There used to be a N10-008, and for those of you that have been watching, that is an exam, at least the English language version of that exam is no longer available. So it retired on December the 20th, about a month ago. So if you have been studying for your Network Plus, you should be studying the latest exam version, which is the N10-009. It's one we've been doing study groups for quite some time now. One of the things that you should know about it is that it was released on June the 20th of last year, which means we estimate the retirement for this particular exam to be somewhere around Q4 of 2027. So there's what you should be focusing on is way down the road. You don't have to worry if you are studying for your Network Plus right now. You are using the right version as long as all of your study materials are specifically written for this version, the N10-009. Make sure you're aware of that. The exam itself is 90 minutes in length. You could get a maximum of 90 questions. You could get fewer than 90 on your exam. You need to score a 720, which is on a scale between 100 and 900. The exam itself is mostly multiple choice questions, very similar to the one we just did, but there are also other types of questions on the exam called performance-based questions. We'll talk about performance-based questions in just a bit, and of course, I have a performance-based question for you coming up in just a few minutes. Don't forget about our website and all of the additional study materials that we create for you. If this is something you think you might want to use, we have an entire success bundle with course notes, downloadable versions of our courses, audio versions of these courses, and more. You can find it all on our website. Go to professormesser.com/netsuccess. We also have a number of third-party products on our site that we love, and they're always available to you at a discount. That might be something you might want to look through. Of course, this live stream is available for replay immediately after we're done today. And I do make an audio-only replay version, and I distribute it in a podcast format so that you can easily subscribe to it in your favorite podcast listening program, either on your mobile device, your desktop, or anything else you might be using. We also have this audio version available over on third-party streaming sites. So if you're on Spotify, for example, simply search for Professor Messer and you'll find them on Spotify as well. If you'd like to add this to your existing podcast listening program, you can either search through the index available on the app that you use, or you can go to professormesser.com/podcast, and all of the details are there as well. We also, about a day after we are done, you will notice that on the YouTube video description, that suddenly timestamps will appear in the YouTube description. Those timestamps don't appear automatically. It is thanks to the hard work of my marketing manager, Lori. Hi, Lori. She's watching this replay, and she's watching the chat go by. So if you're someone who enjoys those timestamps, please give Lori a thank you in the chat. It's something that we have done years of these so that you can find exactly what you're looking for and that you can find it as quickly as possible. There's only so much time in the day, and there's a lot of studying that we need to do. So we're trying to make this a little bit easier for you as you go through the details. When we're not doing a live stream, you can find us over on our Discord. There are thousands of people that are registered on the Professor Messer Discord, many of them studying for their A+, their Network Plus, their Security Plus, or even other certifications as well. We've also got people there that have already gone through their certifications that are there to help. They're just showing up and helping in whatever way that they can, and they're paying it forward. Hopefully something that you can find there. We'd love to have you join us. Find us over at professormesser.com/discord. Eventually, you will need to take your Network Plus exam. And although I wish I could give you the exams for free, unfortunately, there is a cost associated with that. But that cost can be minimized a bit. Now, certainly, you could go to the CompTIA website and pay full price for your voucher if you happen to be in the U.S., Canada, or U.S. territory. But why would you do that when I have the same vouchers over at my site for a discounted cost? We're able to do this because we are a platinum partner of CompTIA. There's fewer than 30 of these in the world, and they are giving us the opportunity to get that discount and apply it towards your purchase. So have a look at that. It's at professormesser.com/vouchers. But not only do you get a discounted voucher if you purchase it from my site, you also get a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook that I've created with a set of tips and tricks for studying and tips and tricks on how you can manage and strategize during the exam itself to perhaps give you a couple of extra points. This is a book I don't sell. You can only get this book if you buy a voucher or my success bundle. So this is a bit of an exclusive. You can find it at my website. It's at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go through that question I asked earlier. The question was, a network engineer would like to prevent client disassociation attacks. Which of the following would be the best option? Would it be to require HTTPS for all web communication, use a VPN to connect remote sites, enable 802.1x on all switches, enable personal firewalls on all devices, or upgrade all access points to a newer standard? We're going to stop our poll and see how you did with this one. We can see that 38% of you say upgrade all access points to a newer standard. And although traditionally that would be a low number, I believe it's a higher number than we got last month. So I'm taking that as a win. 28% of you said to enable 802.1x on all switches. We have then single digits. This is one of these questions where we didn't get any single digits at all. We got double digits rather, but a three-way tie for third place with use a VPN to connect remote sites at 12%, require HTTPS for all web communication at 11%, and enable personal firewalls on all devices also at 11%. Well, if we go with the plurality of you, 38% of you said to upgrade all access points to a newer standard, and that is exactly what you would need to do, because a client disassociation attack is not about understanding who's connected, how they connected, what type of authentication method they use to connect, what type of security software you're running on your local device. Instead, this is an attack that is hitting the signal of the wireless network itself and using some of the management protocols of 802.11 to disconnect people from the wireless network. So it really doesn't matter what operating system you're using, what personal firewall you might be using, what type of encryption you might be using. None of that is going to help you if you have an access point that is susceptible to this particular kind of attack. There's effectively nothing you at an individual level can do to stop this. Your machine configuration and any changes you make to your local configuration on your machine will have no effect. That's how bad this particular kind of attack happens to be. That's because the attacker is taking advantage of a vulnerability that exists in earlier versions of the 802.11 management frames that allows someone to send a disconnect signal to the access point without any type of authentication at all, which means anybody could do this if you happen to be using an access point that's older than the fix. So a fix was implemented into the 802.11 standard itself. So one of the very few things that you can do to prevent this particular problem is to simply upgrade your access point and use a newer version. Use a newer version of the existing 802.11 standard. On our video for this, which is in section 5.4 on wireless issues, we talk more about this. I give you a demonstration of it. You're able to see it happen in real time. You can really understand how bad this particular problem happens to be. And we talk about what versions of 802.11 standards are susceptible and how you can resolve those. So that is the right answer. Upgrading all access points to a newer standard is the only one of these options that would allow you to prevent this type of problem. Requiring HTTPS for all web communication won't stop it. Using a VPN is not going to stop it. Enabling 802.1x, which is authentication to log into the network, that's not going to stop it. It's going to simply throw you off of the network. And then enabling personal firewalls, again, nothing you do on your local machine is going to be able to stop this particular kind of problem. Hopefully you were familiar with that. And if you're not, now you are. Maybe if you get a question on your exam about disassociation on a wireless network, you'll know that it has to do with a vulnerability within the version of the 802.11 standard itself. Hopefully you're now more familiar with that. Now we can shift our gears to something a little bit more meaty than a multiple choice question. As I mentioned earlier, the exam and the bulk of the exam is mostly multiple choice questions. The question we just had, for example, is a multiple choice question where there is a question and then multiple options you can choose from. But even if you didn't know the answer here, you had a 20% chance of guessing and getting it right. And CompTIA doesn't want to give you that much leeway. They don't want to give you that much of a of a gimme if you happen to guess correctly. So they want to ask you some questions that are in a little bit of a different format. Now, fortunately, all of these questions that are performance-based questions are all based on the material that you're already studying. They're not telling you or asking you about something you don't know about. These are all topics that come directly from the official CompTIA exam objectives. So this is a really good example of this. Hopefully, you're very familiar with how you would go through the process of understanding these details. And if we step through this one, I think you'll probably do pretty good. Now, a performance-based question might be one where they put you to a command prompt and ask you to perform a function. It might be a matching question. There might be a drag and drop function. You may be pulling down a menu and selecting in different places. It's really just a more fancy way of asking these questions of you. Sometimes I hear this described as taking many different multiple choice questions and simply cramming them into one single performance-based question. And I think that's probably a pretty good description of this. Let's do a performance-based question today. This is one where I'm looking for 3 different answers to this particular question. This question says, a technician has received reports of intermittent internet connectivity from a Windows user. And we want to do 3 different things for this particular performance-based question. If you were put at this prompt that you see on the screen, I want you to determine the default gateway of that device that this user is using. I want to verify connectivity to the default gateway. And I want to document the MAC address of that default gateway. This is the first step in troubleshooting this particular problem. So hopefully you're familiar with what these commands would be. We're going to step through each of these commands when we are done here. But as always, we want to be able to submit your answers by using the link at the bottom of the screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA right here at the bottom and submit your answers. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We are instead going to focus on the details of this. Hopefully this can give you some perspective on things that might be asked of you during the exam. So feel free to go out and have a look at those. This is one that is a pretty good description of the type of thing that you should be prepared for. So hopefully you're familiar with what you would do to make these things happen. So have a look at that. Again, the question asks, a technician has received reports of intermittent internet connectivity from a Windows user. And I'm looking for 3 answers here. A lot of people are giving me 1 answer. I need 3 answers. Your answers should be, what is the first question is, determine the default gateway of the device. The second is verify connectivity to the default gateway. And the third is document the MAC address of the default gateway. These are not a single command. These are 3 different commands. That's really the only hint I'll give you in this particular case. And I'll also give you a reminder that we want to answer the question by visiting the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Remember, on your exam, you get no hints. You are just in a room looking at a screen. There's no Google. There's nobody we can talk to, and there's certainly no chat room, which would be really nice if there was, but there is not. We have to do this ourselves. See if you know the answer. Submit that answer right now. Go to professormesser.com/QA. It will take you right over to the correct screen to input your answer. A lot of you doing very well. I'm sneaking a peek at the answers that are coming in. Many of you are getting the first one, that first bullet you're submitting, and you're good. But a lot of you are missing the other 2. So have a look at what those other 2 might be. You also have to be very particular about the syntax. This is something you would be typing in at the command line. Make sure that the spelling of this is correct, or else it's not going to work correctly. In fact, some of you are even giving me more information than I even needed, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. But the exam doesn't necessarily need you to provide that information either. These are probably 3 relatively straightforward commands. Let's see how you do with understanding what they are. A lot of people submitting their answers still as we have this going in. So thank you for submitting that at professormesser.com/QA. A lot of folks did really well on this one, but there are a number of things here that make this a little more complicated. Some of you are overcomplicating it. In fact, there's a relatively straightforward set of commands we can use for something like this. Let's step through this, in fact, and see how I would do it, and then you can tell me if this is the way that you would do it. So again, the question asks, a technician has received reports of intermittent internet connectivity from a Windows user. So all of the answers that we're going to do here will be from a Windows machine. That's really the prompt I'm giving you in that particular question. So if you are working through the details of this, the first thing that we will need to do is determine the default gateway of the device. The default gateway of the device, we would then use a command known as ipconfig. ipconfig is one that gives you a summary of the IP configuration of a Windows computer. This is a very common command. It's probably one of the first commands we type in when we're troubleshooting from somebody's workstation, because when you sit down at someone's machine, you don't know what their IP address is. You don't know what their subnet mask is. You don't know what their default gateway is. You don't know how they got their IP address. You don't know what DNS servers are on this particular configuration. And in this particular question, where I just wanted to know the default gateway, this is probably the easiest version of this command because there's no extra information, no extra tags that you have to put into this command. Now, if you're on a Linux machine, it's a different set of commands. You're either using the ifconfig, because we can't have it the same command. We have to have a different command over on Linux. And to complicate things further, on Linux, there's always another way to do it. And in Linux, you'll find that some of the newer distributions will use an updated version of this command, and its IP is the command, and then the parameter you would use to view address information is the word address. So on Linux, IP space address would be a common way to do this, assuming that ifconfig was not already available on that system. Ifconfig is what they call deprecated. No, they're not really going to be doing any more work on ifconfig on a Linux machine, so make sure you're familiar with both of those. You never know what you're going to run into. You'll notice, though, that if you run the ipconfig command with no parameters in it, this is me running it on my machine so that we can see this. Now you can see that you've got IPv6 information. You've got link local IPv6 addresses, because with IPv6, you not only get an address that can be used to communicate outside of your local network, every machine also gets an IPv6 link local address, which is a little different than IPv4. With IPv4, though, we do list the IPv4 information, and notice if you just use the ipconfig command, it tells you the IPv4 address for this machine, which in this case is 10.1.10.102. The subnet mask for this machine, in this case, it's 255.255.255.0. And then the information we were looking for, which was determine the default gateway of this device. Well, the default gateway is here in red. It is 10.1.10.1. So now we've already answered the first one. We know what the answer is because we simply typed in ifconfig, hit enter, ipconfig, we hit enter. I was in Linux there for a moment, and we were able to look at that information. So let's see what the next one would be. The next one, as you recall, was a bullet that said, verify connectivity to the default gateway. So in this particular case, we know the default gateway is 10.1.10.1. If we wanted to see if that gateway was able to respond to us, we would use a ping command. The ping command is one that we would add a parameter to, and that parameter would be the device we would like to get a response from. In this case, our default gateway, which, as we saw earlier, was 10.1.10.1. So if we run the ping command, 10.1.10.1, in Windows, it will ping it 4 times. It will do 4 attempts to communicate to that particular device. And then the ping command, 10.1.10.1, runs 4 times. You can see all 4 of those are here. And at the bottom, it gives us statistics for this, saying we sent 4, we received 4, which means we didn't lose any of that information back and forth. This is one that is a perfect example for determining if a device is available. Some of you use some other commands for this, things like traceroute, for example, but traceroute is not a reliable way to determine if a device is available, because the information, depending on the traceroute that you're using, could easily be filtered on that particular device. Then again, a ping could also be filtered. That's a whole different set of things we would worry about, but usually on our local networks, especially for our local default gateways, we leave that ICMP function available so that we can receive an answer back. So here we were able to get the second of these three bullets answered, which would be ping and then the IP address of the default gateway. Now, the third question was one that was a little more difficult because I wanted to know what the MAC address of that device is, of that default gateway. Document the MAC address of the default gateway. Now, notice that in everything that we've looked at here, it's all IP addresses. It's all layer 3 addresses, as we say in the world of OSI. So we don't have any layer 2 information. We don't have any MAC address information on this Ethernet network. But since we just pinged this device, it leads us to know that we were only able to ping that device because we were able to determine what the MAC address was of that device. And the MAC address is now stored on our local machine in a cache. If we would just know the command to be able to list that cache, we could very easily find a list of MAC addresses and what IP address they are associated with. The command that allows you to do that is the ARP command, specifically the ARP command with a parameter of -A. So ARP-A is what we were looking for. ARP-A is a very good way to list out, very quick way to list out everything this device believes is associated with IP addresses and their associated physical address. That would be your MAC address in the world of Ethernet networks. So in this particular case, you can see that I have 10.1.10.1. It's at the very top of this, and you can see the full MAC address of my default gateway is listed here, which is 9 Charlie 05 Delta 6 Charlie Bravo Bravo 4 Charlie 3. That's my MAC address. So now, and you can see that this is a dynamic address because we had to query that address to have that information provided to us. So all that happened behind the scenes. We didn't even see it happening when we hit the ping command. It's one that came right back to us. This is also showing us static addresses that are in here. There's a number of IP addresses that are always configured on this particular device, and you can see the MAC addresses associated with those. For example, the default broadcast address for this network is 10.1.10.255. And of course, the default broadcast MAC address is what we call all ones, which would be all Fs in the world of hexadecimal. So that's one that's just always there. It never goes away. It is static. This dynamic update that was added to the cache is only going to be there for a certain amount of time. And that amount of time depends on the configuration of your operating system. It might be there for 60 seconds. It might be there for 2 minutes. It might be there for 5 minutes. There's different ways to even configure that on a system. But this is one that eventually, if we don't communicate to that default gateway any longer, eventually that will time out and automatically remove itself from the ARP cache. And if we need to ping that device again, it will perform that resolution again to determine what the MAC address is. So that's what we were looking for, is that version of the command ARP-A. That was the third command that we were looking for this particular issue. So we have determining the default gateway of a device. We use the ipconfig command to provide that information. Some of you said ipconfig/all, which is certainly something you could do. It's giving you way more information than you need, but still, I think we'll take that as credit. Verifying connectivity to the default gateway is a ping command. And then you have documenting the MAC address of the default gateway. We did that using the ARP command. Those are all three Windows commands you need to know. And of course, there are many other Windows commands that you need to know for the Network Plus certification. Make sure you look at the official CompTIA exam objectives so you know exactly what command will be expected of you. This is something that will be very important if you're working towards learning everything you need to know for your Network Plus certification. There are also a number of commands you need to know and hardware devices you need to know. It's all in that troubleshooting section, something you should look through and be ready for any potential performance-based question you might run into. Let's now shift gears back to a multiple choice question. This next question asks, a user has disconnected the Ethernet cable on their desktop computer and connected it to and plugged it into a laptop, but the Ethernet connection is not working. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? And we can assume, of course, that when we had it plugged into our desktop, it was working fine. We unplug it. We now plug it into our laptop. It's not working. What would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be that port security is enabled? Spanning tree is running? It is outdated. If we had a T, it would be outdated SSH certificate. This is how you know I wrote these, by the way. Incorrect credentials are used, or an outdated outdated firmware on the laptop. I don't know what happened there. So let's go through these answers again for those of you trying to follow along with me. The question asks, a user has disconnected the Ethernet cable on their desktop computer and plugged it into a laptop, but the Ethernet connection is not working. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Port security is enabled, spanning tree is running, it's an outdated SSH certificate, incorrect credentials are used, or an outdated firmware on the laptop. You think you know the answer? Use the link on your screen to submit your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and hopefully you're able to submit your answer in something that is spelled correctly. So hopefully this is one that will be very easy, because hopefully all you have to do is choose the right one. You can't misspell the answer like I do. This is how you know it's a live stream, by the way, is that we just can't change it now. It's too late. We're already in the middle of it. There probably is an easy way for me to do that, but I'm not going to. We're going to own it. We're going to enjoy it. We're going to soak in it for a little while and see how it feels. So answer that question. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and you would be able to answer that question as well. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Please no guesses in the chat room. We're going to have to just add on to our list of things. That's what we would use. Hopefully you're familiar with this type of problem. You've run into this issue before. Maybe it's something that you would be familiar with. Be sure you submit your answer now. A lot of people already got it in here, so let's see how you did. The question again asks, a user has disconnected the Ethernet cable on their desktop computer and plugged it into a laptop, but the Ethernet connection is not working. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Port security is enabled, spanning tree is running, it's an outdated SSH certificate, incorrect credentials are used, or it's an outdated firmware on the laptop. Let's close the poll and see how you did with this one. 77% of you say that port security is enabled. That's a big piece of this pie that is here. 14% of you say there's outdated firmware on the laptop. We have 6% that say incorrect credentials are used. 2% say it's an outdated SSH certificate, and only 1% said that spanning tree is running. So if we go with I would say the vast majority of you that say port security is enabled, maybe we go with that one. So if you are someone who answered port security, that is the answer we were looking for. This is how port security is supposed to work. The idea is that we don't want somebody showing up to an interface that is available, or a cable that's lying somewhere, have it plug into their device and have that cable suddenly provide access to our local network. Instead, we want to have that interface with some type of security that would prevent somebody from plugging in their own devices and getting around some of our security features. This is all based on the MAC address of the device. So this is the physical address on that particular component. As you may be thinking, this is not a surefire way to prevent it, because you can, of course, change MAC addresses on devices. So this is not a 100% secure method, but it does help in many ways, especially if somebody has no idea why things might be filtered. The way that it works is that every interface on a switch is configured with the MAC addresses that are allowed to connect to that particular switch. This is something, it sounds like it would be difficult to administer, but you can, in most implementations of this, you're able to have the switch automatically determine that based on who the first person was to connect to that switch. From that point on, you're locked in to that particular switch and be able to work through this. So that's why, well, that's not the question we want to do, but that is why we would choose port security as the answer for this particular question. That's the one that we were looking for. And indeed, most of you knew this already. 77% of you said port security is what's causing that. And that's what we would like. We would like to have somebody, if they have a machine plugged in, we don't want somebody showing up middle of the night, unplugging your machine, plugging in their laptop, and suddenly having access to the network. Port security would prevent that from happening. Now, because of that, because it's port security, it's something happening on the switch itself. So because of that, updating the firmware on the laptop, not going to help you, because the laptop is not the problem. The laptop is not causing the issue. So outdated firmware has no effect in this particular case. Incorrect credentials, we're not even getting to the point where we're using credentials. The switch is shutting us down. We're not even able to connect. So credentials are not the issue. Outdated SSH certificate, similar scenario. We're not even at a point where we can SSH into anything because the switch won't allow us to communicate. And then spanning tree running, this is not a spanning tree issue. We're simply plugging in a single Ethernet device. We're not setting up any type of loop on the network. You can't loop with a single connection into your computer, at least not generally speaking. For those of you familiar with sub-interfaces, we can have a conversation later. And then in this particular case, the only thing left then would indeed be port security. So you should have led this all the way, even if you didn't know it was port security. That was really the only thing left that has at least some type of security feature associated with it. That is the answer that we would use, port security, and 77% of you got that one absolutely correct. Now let's do another question. You've already seen this question, so what am I waiting for? Here it is. The question asks, a network administrator has captured network traffic containing UDP 123. I'm making this up. That's what they captured. Which of the following would be the most likely use of this network communication? Would it be that we are monitoring a device for downtime? We are authenticating to a central authentication database? Are we transferring email messages between email servers? Are we setting the date and time? Or are we encrypting communication at a command line? If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. You're doing a very good job of that today, by the way, with making sure that we keep the answers private until we show them on the screen. So thank you so much for that. We appreciate it. So for those of you that are, in fact, one of the things I'll mention, some of you are talking about some of the answers that we had in the previous question. What I try to do on these study groups is every one of the answers that I provide have a link or a connection back to the official exam objectives. So if you happen to see a term, if you happen to see a definition, or if I talk about a technology in these questions, it is coming directly from the exam objectives. So make a note of that. So if you're thinking, I don't recognize that term, or that's something I need to get more familiarity with, make a note of it because you need to go back to your exam objectives and use that as something that you can study before taking your exam. Very, very useful. We've got a lot to go through here. For those of you that are, there was a question in the chat room about when do we do these live streams? We do have a calendar. So you can go to ProfessorMesser.com/calendar. If you're on our Discord, you can go to the Discord events channel. I always keep those updated, so you always know when the next live event is going to be. Let's answer this question, though. The question asks, a network administrator has captured network traffic containing UDP 123. Which of the following would be the most likely use of this network communication? Would it be monitor a device for downtime, authenticate to a central authentication database, transfer email messages between mail servers, set the date and time, or encrypt communication at a command line? Let's see what you answered. We will stop our poll and we'll see that we've got another big number. 72% of you say the answer is set the date and time, but 10% of you said monitor a device for downtime. Right behind that, we have authenticate to a central authentication database. And then down at the lower levels, 5% said transfer email messages between mail servers, and 4% of you say to encrypt communication at the command line. This is obviously a port number question. And if you look at your official CompTIA exam objectives, they give you a list of the port numbers and the protocols that are associated with those. And it is a relatively finite list. It's not an enormous list. I think there's probably about 20 different port numbers you need to know. And I suspect a number of you probably already know most of them, especially if you've already been and taken your A+ exam. A lot of these are repeats for you. So if you did do that, you probably recognized UDP 123. In your list of port numbers, it simply has 123. And the UDP 123 is one commonly associated with NTP. That is the Network Time Protocol. It is a protocol that we use to be able to set the time on all of our devices. And on a local network, we can get pretty precise times and dates, very specific, down to the 10 millisecond time frame anyway. This is one that can be very, very useful to maintain consistent dates and times across all of your devices. And if you're going to be a network administrator, you will be looking through a lot of log files. And so all of your switches, all of your routers, all of your firewalls, all of your VPN concentrators, all of your authentication servers, all of your Active Directory devices, everything on your network needs to have exactly the same date and time on it so that you can easily consolidate all of these log files and be able to look through them in a way where you can understand what happened first, what happened second, what happened third. The only way you can do that across multiple devices is if you have the same date and time running on all of them. Now, there are some very advanced forms of this. And in fact, on the Network Plus, you are expected to understand not just NTP, but some of the more advanced methods for setting even more precise date and times on a device. Well, we're a little bit outside the scope of that for this question, but on a local network, you can get down to 1 millisecond granularity with this, which gives, for most of us, I think that's probably pretty good. We don't have to worry about too much more of that. So network time protocol is what we were looking for, which means setting the date and time. That's exactly what we would use the UDP running with port 123, which has inside of it most often the network time protocol. Now, all of these other explanations I gave here are also associated with protocols. Let's see if we can figure out what protocol I was referring to. So monitoring a device for downtime, also a UDP protocol, probably using port 161 so that we can use SNMP. That's what we would use for that. We also have other port numbers listed in here. 9% of you said authenticate to a central authentication database. This could be a number of different options. You could use LDAP, you could use Kerberos, you could use TACACS, you could use Radius, and all of those have different port numbers that they commonly use by default. Transferring messages between mail servers, that's an SMTP function, simple network or simple mail transfer protocol, SMTP. And then we have encrypting communication at the command line. That's either a VPN, it's SSH, or something similar to that. Probably SSH would be a good explanation of that. So that would be more like TCP port 22. So one thing that you should do when you're looking at those port numbers in the exam objectives, make sure you are looking at them and understand not just what port number is associated with what protocol, but add on to that, what does that do for me? SNMP is UDP port 161. What does that do for me? How does that help me? So you need to not only understand the connection between those two, but you also need to understand the explanation of why you would even use that protocol to begin with. You will probably never see, I've never seen on a Network Plus exam, a simple question that asks, what port number is used by NTP? Or what protocol uses UDP 123? They're never going to ask you something so trivial. Trivia questions are not on the Network Plus exam. Instead, it's probably one more like this, where there's a scenario, here's a thing that we found, what would this be? And in fact, that's exactly what we see here. In fact, you'll notice in the question and the answer, NTP is not even on this. The network time protocol is not spelled out. The protocol abbreviation is not on this page. That's very common to the exam objective. So another good example of how you could also look at that list and expand on it just a little bit. Don't just use it as a flashcard. Do I know what it is? Add a little more context, because the exam will certainly expect you to know that context. Well, if you now look through a few questions and answers that we've done already, there's a lot of information on this exam. The Network Plus exam, although it is many, many different topics, there are a lot of topics to choose from. And in fact, our video training course is 87 videos in length, over 12 hours of content. And as much as I would love for you to watch every single one of these videos, it could be that you just don't have the time to go through all of it, or maybe that some of the topics are things you're already familiar with, but it sure would be nice to reference those so you know exactly what to expect on the exam. So one of the things I did was take all of the information from every single one of these videos and put it into one single document. These are my N10-009 Network Plus course notes. The course notes are designed to give you all of the text. I'm going to go through, this is the PDF digital edition version that's in front of me. All of the text from our videos, all of the charts that I have, all of the important graphics that I showed during the video, they are all in this well-organized set of course notes that follows every video one after the other. The name of the video and the number of the objective is always at the top of every single one of these. You can go through all of these notes and have everything that we have put on every one of our Network Plus videos. If you like that version, you can of course also get a different version of this in a physical edition. It's the same information, but it is in a printed form so that you can then add that, take it with you. You don't need a computer, you don't need a laptop, you don't need a tablet. It's always with you and something that you can always use for that. That is our course notes, something that might help you on your studies. And hopefully if that does, that might be something that you're able to take advantage of. You can find that on our website at professormesser.com/NPCN. You can also use the menus at the top of the site. Let's do more questions. Next on our list is this question that asks, a security engineer is adding IPS rules to their firewall. Which of the following would be affected by this configuration change? Would it be public key infrastructure, role-based access control, identity and access management, encryption protocols, or data in transit? Got a few things to go through there. Let's see if you can break that down. A security engineer is adding IPS rules to their firewall. Which of the following would be affected by this configuration change? Would it be public key infrastructure, role-based access control, identity and access management, encryption protocols, or data in transit? If you think you know the answer, use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See if you know what this answer is. Maybe some of you even done this. And if it's sometimes weird that folks see it written this way, but this is indeed where most of us make our IPS rule configurations. These days, we don't commonly see standalone intrusion. Well, I don't want to say what the name is. Standalone IPS devices. Really didn't give much away there. But instead of having a standalone device, the IPS functionality is now built into our next generation firewalls. So the firewall that you are using in your enterprise, this probably is not what you're using at home. Your enterprise firewalls probably have IPS rules that you can add to them. Although my firewall that I have in my home also has IPS rules, but I'm not using a normal off-the-shelf Linksys firewall for my house. I'm using something that is a little bit more involved, probably because I thought it would be a good idea. Plus, I wanted the bigger, faster, meaner system. So I got that. But I've got a 10 gig firewall for my house, which I'm glad I did because I'm currently at a 1 gig connection for the internet. I get 2 gig here in the next month or so. And they say that 8 gig is coming. Bidirectional, 8 gigabits per second. It's like we're living in the future. I love it. So I'm going to take advantage of that if at all possible. If they don't make it too horribly expensive. Hopefully that's something we can do. And maybe it's something you can do. A lot of you are putting in your answers. There's no Googling. Stop the Googling. You may not do that. No Googling on this one. We want to take this question and answer it as if we are sitting in the exam room. Let's see how you did. The question again asks, a security engineer is adding IPS rules to their firewall. Which of the following would be affected by this configuration change? Is it public key infrastructure, role-based access control, identity and access management, encryption protocols, or data in transit? We're going to close our poll and see how you did with this one. We a little mixed on this one. We have 41% of you that say data in transit is what would be affected. 32% of you, right behind it, say identity and access management. And then the last double digit we have is 16% of you that say role-based access control. We have also single digits, 8% said encryption protocols and 3% said public key infrastructure. Well, one of the important parts of this, I mentioned earlier that simply knowing an abbreviation doesn't necessarily help you answer a question. I think this is a pretty good example of this. So an IPS is an intrusion prevention system. That is what we are talking about when we're adding rules to the firewall. So that doesn't give us the answer, though. What does an IPS do for us? Again, it's all about context. Knowing that the technology is called IPS and knowing that it stands for Intrusion Prevention System doesn't provide you with any context at all. You would have to know that an IPS is looking for known vulnerabilities within traffic that is actively flowing into or even out of your organization. We are looking for things that are well-known attacks, and we're looking to stop them at the IPS, in this case, at the firewall. We are able to block those from even getting into our network because the IPS will look for known vulnerabilities and will block that information right away so that you're not able to send those vulnerabilities in. This might be a SQL injection. It might be a zero-day Windows vulnerability that people keep trying to use, hoping they'll find a device that is not patched. Maybe it is just a known vulnerability that comes out. It's not a zero-day. It's just a vulnerability during that monthly vulnerability update that we get from Microsoft. That is another thing that is added to the list of rules. And if it's something that we can recognize coming across the network, we can stop it before it even gets into our network. Think of that layering of security that we get from that. So even if you have not patched your Windows system, but you have an IPS rule that is aware of that vulnerability, we can block it before it gets inside of your network and ends up infecting that particular host. Now, obviously, it doesn't affect other devices inside of your network that could attack that same host, but that's a different kind of problem with a different set of security issues, and that's why we used a layered approach when it comes to IT security. Pretty important for this. But back to the question, if that's what we're blocking is known vulnerabilities, then it's not going to be anything related to our public key infrastructure. That's not a vulnerability. Role-based access control, not a vulnerability. Identity and access management, definitely not a vulnerability. We need that to be able to work. And generally speaking, it's probably not coming in from the internet side of things. Encryption protocols, that's not a vulnerability. We want encryption protocols. That's not what IPS would change. The issue, though, is what is it doing? It's looking at live traffic going through the network and being able to, here we go, look at the data as it's traversing the network. This is known as data in transit. Sometimes you'll hear this referred to as data in motion. So anything that is looking at traffic in real time as it's going by, this would be your switches, your routers, and even the individual devices on your network are looking at this traffic in real time as it's going across the network. We refer to that as data in transit. It's important to understand these states of data. So you have data that might be stored somewhere. It might be stored in a file that is on an SSD or on a hard drive or on a network attached storage device. That's data at rest. I guess it's resting. It's taking a break. It's just hanging out on that storage device. Data at rest. Data in motion or data in transit is what we have going across the network. And if this data is in the CPU of our system and it's in the memory and we're performing calculations on this data, we refer to that as data in use. So in this particular case, because we're talking about an IPS, we're talking about blocking known vulnerabilities. We're doing all of this in real time. That's why it's an intrusion prevention system, because it prevents that traffic from coming through. That means that the answer we were looking for is indeed data in transit. And 41% of you got that one absolutely correct. It would not be any of these other protocols because none of these are affected or have anything to do with configurations that we would set in our IPS. IPSs are only going to block things that are known vulnerabilities. In this list of things, the only thing that matches what an IPS would do would be data in transit. We're getting close to the top of the hour, but we got some time left. Before we get to this next question, though, let me remind you that you are able to earn a 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. That's a continuing education unit credit just by watching this event today. Obviously, this will only be good for you if you're someone who has already earned a certification or you have some other thing that you need to renew or update using CEUs. But if you need a copy, you need an email that's showing this. And if you're watching this on a replay, really even if you're live, I highly recommend you submit this to be able to get your emailed verification that you were here, I want you to follow these instructions. You must follow these instructions to earn the CEU. You want to go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, please put your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put January 2025 Network Plus. And in the body of the message, on a line by itself, please put the super secret code words of the month, data in transit, encryption protocols. A lot of words this month. So that's what we would do. The continuing education unit credit that you can earn, you would go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link, put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, put January 2025 Network Plus, and in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, data in transit, encryption protocols. So that would give you an email that is sent to me. All happens behind the scenes. And because of that, if you want to add other information in there, I love to get the stories about where you are with your studies, why you're getting the CEU, what you're working on next. It just keeps me up to date. And while I'm going through these manually, which is what I do to be able to send these out, I like to know, it keeps it interesting for me anyway. So if you care at all about my well-being, you'd put something in but you don't have to. If you simply put data in transit, encryption protocols, I know exactly what you need, and I got you. I will be able to send that out very, very quickly. So what I do is I manually check and make sure they're correct. Then I hit a button, and it does this automation that takes place that sends it off to you. So it's not quite as tedious, as arduous as I made it sound. Fortunately, very simple. That is our process for earning your continuing education unit credit of the month. Remember, you can only get a limited number of those CEUs to apply towards your renewal. You'll have to go get other CEUs somewhere else. If you need more details on that, they are all available on the CompTIA website under the continuing education list in their main menu. Let's do another question because we have time. We're sort of at the top of the hour, but got a minute or so left. Let's do another question. This question asks, a technician is communicating to a device over an out-of-band connection. Which of the following is the technician most likely connecting to? Are they connecting to a VPN concentrator, default VLAN, console interface, loopback address, or jump box? Quite a few to choose from there. A technician is communicating to a device over an out-of-band connection. Which of the following is the technician most likely connecting to? VPN concentrator, default VLAN, console interface, loopback address, or jump box? You think you know the answer? Follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See if you know what this answer is. A lot of people locking their answers in pretty quick. That makes me think we know what the answer is. So I try to make these somewhat difficult to decipher, but you guys are really smart. It's sometimes difficult. What I think is difficult, you get it so easily. And the ones that I think are going to be just an easy one sometimes end up being the difficult ones. Maybe that should tell me something. Maybe that should point out to me a flaw in my reasoning. Does it? It does not. I still continue with the same method as we go down the line. I think we do pretty well with this, though. I think we sort of break it down, work the details, go through each question, go through each answer. One advantage we have when we're doing these live streams is that we don't have to worry too much about time. We don't have to worry about failing an exam. There's not really any stress associated with this. I feel like it's when you're watching a game show on TV and you know the answer. How come they don't know the answer? It's right in front of them. It's a lot more difficult to do when you're right there and the lights are on you and it's a lot of pressure. So this is good practice. This is a good chance for us to go through these different scenarios so that when you get to the exam and you see words you recognize, you'll feel a little more at ease. That's the whole point of this. For those in the chat room asking, if you'd like to ask a question for the after show, you can go to the same link, professormesser.com/QA. There's a little tab at the top of the screen, and you can do that. Just add your question to that list. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asked, a technician is communicating to a device over an out-of-band connection. Which of the following is the technician most likely connecting to? Which means there could be more than one right answer, but only one is the most likely. The possible answers are VPN concentrator, default VLAN, console interface, loopback address, or jump box. Let's see what you chose for this answer. Wow, we are all over the place. We have to break this one down pretty well. We have 31% that say console interface, 29% that say jump box, and 28% that say VPN concentrator. Wow, that's like three. We're tied. Three of them are tied for first place. And then 9% say default VLAN. We drop way down right after that. And then 4% say loopback address. So an out-of-band connection. That's what we are talking about in this particular question. So it might be useful to talk about why you would ever use an out-of-band connection. Out-of-band connections are there in case the end-band connection is not available for whatever reason. So let's define what those happen to be. In-band means that you are using the existing network connection to connect to a device. So if you have set up a switch, a router, a firewall, you've probably noticed that you've given those devices an IP address that's used for management. So when you need to SSH to your switch to make a configuration change, you're using the SSH command to a particular IP address. It's going across your Ethernet network. It's connecting that to that device over that Ethernet connectivity, and you're able at those Ethernet speeds to be able to configure that device. If you need to configure another device, you use a different IP address, you go over to a different switch, a different router, or a different firewall, and you're connecting to that device through those particular connections, through the network that's currently running, the in-band communication. But what if this is a switch that's at a remote site and that remote site WAN link is no longer available? If you tried to connect to that device using SSH and the IP address, would not connect to that device because you can't connect. The IP address is inaccessible because you no longer have a network connection. And here we are in North America, in this part of the globe. We have winter time right now. We have ice, we have snow, we have problems that could cause outages. What do we do if we have an outage, but we still need to configure that device? Well, one of the ways you can do it is by not using the Ethernet connection. Instead, let's go around that connection to what we call an out-of-band connection. Out-of-band connections means that we are using some other method to communicate to this device that is not through the normal primary network communication. So very often we would have a cellular connection to this device. You would have a modem connection in some scenarios to this device. Maybe you have a separate management network that you've configured. Maybe there's a DSL line that you installed just for this very scenario. Maybe there's a cable modem you installed. So you would have one connection that is always up for your network, but then you have this one that you can always use to connect to that device. Now, obviously, if we have a problem with the snow and it took out your main connection, it might take out your other connections as well. So maybe it's a non-terrestrial link. Maybe you're connecting over a Starlink connection. That could certainly be used for out-of-band. But since we're not connecting over Ethernet, what interface would we be plugging into in this device? Well, if you look at your switches, your routers, your firewalls, you're probably going to see a console port, a management port, a COM port. You'll see something that is some third-party interface that is not Ethernet. And because of that, you're able to connect using these, very often a serial communication. Sometimes it's just a USB interface, and you're connecting over a modem connection or some other type. Sometimes it is an Ethernet connection, but you wouldn't plug it into your main network. You plug it into your backup network, your out-of-band network, one that the users normally don't use to communicate to that particular device. That's what we would use. And that's one that is a very common way to do it. Sometimes you're doing that to a single device. There's a single modem connected to a single router, and that's it. Sometimes you're using that modem connection to connect to a comm server, which from there you can then jump to many different devices inside of that building, because you might have a switch and a router and a wireless access point and other devices, servers, point of sale devices, lots of things inside of that particular site. That's something that's very commonly used. Here's another view of this. A more modern view would have kind of a console connection, and it might be an RJ45 serial connection. It looks like Ethernet, but it probably is not. It's probably a serial connection in this scenario, or it might be just USB. USB in the name is serial. That is a universal serial bus. So a very good example of what you would use to be able to connect to this device when the standard Ethernet connection is no longer available. Now, this also means you may need a special cable. You might need a special pinout, a special configuration. You need to check with the configuration, the documentation of that device, of that switch, of that router, of that firewall to determine what can be used for out-of-band communication and what type of connectivity would it expect. Now, why would it not be one of these other popular answers? Console interface is the answer that we were looking for here. The console itself is the out-of-band connection. And if you're plugging in out-of-band, console interface in this list is the most likely one that you are connecting to. Now, a VPN concentrator might have an out-of-band link on it. A jump box might have an out-of-band link on it. But we were talking about plugging into an out-of-band connection, and we need to look at this list to see what is the most likely answer here. VPN concentrators we can connect to through an in-band connection. Jump boxes we can connect to through an in-band connection. A console interface we cannot. Console interfaces are almost exclusively out-of-band connectivity 100% of the time. In fact, for all of the thousands and thousands of systems that I have installed, I've never plugged a console interface into my in-band connection because that's not what it's for. We would never configure it that way. That defeats the purpose of having that separate console interface available. We would always use that as an out-of-band connection. Very common, in fact, for you to carry around a toolkit that's got a bunch of different cables in it. So when you arrive into a building to do on-site troubleshooting, you open up the console closet or you go into the data center and you see the switch that you want to configure, you're going to plug into that console connection. So instead of doing that in person, you can plug a modem into it and do it from somewhere else. That's what we would use, our console interface. Default VLANs are a switch configuration that has nothing to do with out-of-band connectivity, and a loopback address is commonly used to test a physical interface. It's not an out-of-band connection. It's something that we are using to be able to see if that device is running. So that also very often is related to an in-band connection, an in-band test. In fact, we often use the loopback address to determine if we're able to get to that device. And if we are not, then we know we can't go through an in-band connection. We need to go out-of-band. And when we go through that out-of-band connection, you will almost always be connecting to that console interface. 31% of you got that one absolutely correct. That was the answer that we were looking for, was to know what that interface was, what an out-of-band connection would look like. Now you've seen a couple of different out-of-band connections on the screen, and that at least can give you an idea of what you might see if you were to walk up to a switch, a router, a firewall right now. You should automatically look at those. In fact, if you want to see that, go to your favorite switch manufacturer's website, your favorite router manufacturer's website, your favorite firewall manufacturer's website, and have a close-up look at the front of those devices, or download the manual and look in that first chapter of the manual at the breakout of all of the different interfaces on that device. You'll very easily find the console interface, the USB connection, the out-of-band connection. There's a lot of different names for it. You'll easily see it in that list inside of the manual. So hopefully that will give you an idea of where you can focus on understanding where you would plug in and how you would use an out-of-band connection. As you can tell already, there is a lot of information on this exam, and very often people ask me, how do I know if I'm really ready to take the Network Plus exam? Well, one of the things you can do is something absolutely free, and it's on the CompTIA website. It is their official CompTIA exam objectives. I've referenced these objectives about 642 times in this last hour. I apologize, but it is an important document. This is a document you should download before you even start your studies. But if you didn't and you're in the middle of the studies, it's not too late. Download this and start using it as a study guide. This is also a valuable tool to use before booking your exam, because this makes a great checklist to know exactly what topics you know and what topics you don't know. Here's a PDF of the N10-009 objectives. In fact, here's section 1.4, explain common networking ports, protocols, services, and traffic types. Here are all the port numbers we need to know with all the protocols. Notice it doesn't give you any context. That's why I told you, don't just know that, if we look at this, network time protocol, NTP, is port 123. that's not enough information for you. You need to explain them. You need to understand why you would use them. So that's a very good example of finding the things that are very important for you to know on this exam. But let's even go to another section. This is section 1.8, summarize evolving use cases for modern network environments. We need to understand software-defined network, SDN, and software-defined wide area network, or SD-WAN. It's application aware, it's zero-touch provisioning, it's transport agnostic, and it's central policy management. What does that mean? Well, of course, we have a video that explains what that means, but if you can explain what that means to yourself or to someone else, you can check mark that one and keep going through the list. So if you go through this entire document and you look at everything that's here and check off every single one of these bullets, you're going to do perfectly well on this exam. You're not going to have any problems at all. You're going to walk into that exam room and you're going to ace this exam. That's how important this document is. Make sure you get your hands on this. It's absolutely free. You can go to your favorite search engine and type CompTIA Exam Objectives. It'll be your first link. I also have a direct link from my website. Go to professormesser.com/objectives, and you can download it from there. We do one of these Network Plus study groups every month. Of course, I told you we have a Security Plus study group next week, but in February, we've already scheduled our A Plus study groups for the 4th and 6th. Our next Network Plus study group is on February the 12th, and we have our next Security, or the one after next Security Plus, is on February the 19th. Now, some of these dates can sometimes change. So if they do, I update the calendar immediately. So as soon as I know there's a change, I make sure that you know there's a change. So if you're watching this video and you're wondering, is it still going to be on the 12th of next month? Or maybe you're watching this video on a replay and we're way past February the 12th. You want to know, when is the next live event going to be? Check the link right here at the bottom of the screen. Go to professormesser.com/calendar and you'll know exactly when you can join us for one of these live events. We'd love to have you join us. Well, we are not done yet, although we're through the first hour of the study group. We have a lot more to come because I'm going to answer your questions. I know you spent an hour answering my questions. Now let me spend an hour answering your questions. And of course, the way that you could ask those questions is use that same link we've been using this whole time. You can go to professormesser.com/QA and submit your question for what we call our after show at any time. So stick around for that, as immediately afterwards, I take 5-second break and then we're back. So don't worry. There's not much that you'll miss just by being here. Don't forget about our course notes and our Network Plus Course Success Bundle. It's available on our website. Go to professormesser.com/netsuccess. And don't forget about our Exam Hacks ebook that's included for free if you get a voucher from our site. As I mentioned, that's available for people that are in the U.S., Canada, or a U.S. territory. That is at professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, we're on social media. Wherever you are, hopefully we're there as well. The way you would find us is to type in professormesser.com/ the name of the site you would like to find us on. That's not a link. That's a description of what you would put there. So professormesser.com/YouTube, professormesser.com/Twitter, professormesser.com/Instagram. And of course, we have plenty of social media links right at the upper right top of our website. There's some redundancy there with how I am talking, but I think you know what I mean. Go to the top of our website. You'll see all the links there for social media. And if we're not on your favorite social media site, please let me know, and I will see about adding us to that one as well. Be a good thing to use. Stick around for the after show. We have a lot more to go through. Thank you so much for joining us in this first hour. We always have such a good time with us. We will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Okay, I'm going to take a quick sip. One moment, everybody. There we go. Okay, back to where we were. Let's cut me into this and this. There we go. So now is our after show. In the after show, I take your questions. So we're mixing this up just a little bit when we do this. In fact, if you go back to that link, this one, professormesser.com/QA, there is indeed a message that is there on the screen waiting for you that says you can submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. We will be moderating questions during the session, so your contribution may not appear immediately. Simply go to professormesser.com/QA to be able to submit your question. And while you were doing that, just before we started this live stream, there was a doorbell. There was a knock at the door, literally not of the studio, but at my house, at the studio. My studio is at my home. And there was a box waiting for me. That box was one that was sent to me from the good folks at YouTube. And they have sent me this gold plaque that says, presented to Professor Messer for passing 1 million subscribers. Can you believe this? I cannot believe this. So I'm just in awe of all of you. And we are so proud of this particular plaque. This is a more of a representation of what you have been able to do for this channel than anything that I have done. So one of the things you may have even noticed as we've gone through these years of making these videos is I don't really make a lot of YouTube-y type videos. So what I mean by that is I'm not getting you a video on the latest and greatest news that's in the industry. I try not to make videos that have this very odd title and a clickbait. That's not really what we're about here. We're trying to do something a little bit different in the industry. We're trying to do something that is a little bit out of scope. Pardon me just a moment while I put that back. We're trying to do things that are a little bit different. And so we use those numbers that we see on YouTube. We look at our subscription numbers, of course. We look at how many views a video is getting, of course. But instead of using that as a way to see, can we get more? Can we get more? Can we get more? It's more of a way that we're able to tell, are we doing the right thing? So we are so proud of what we have done with this. I'm very proud of this plaque, but it's more of a description of where things have gone, how we have been doing things, and where we've gotten to. In a way, it's just the beginning. I know there's other plaques that are in the future. I think if you get to 10 million, there's a diamond or a platinum or a shiny something. I'm not really trying to get a bunch of plaques. What I'm trying to do is make videos that people can use to get a job or get a better job. I've been in the IT industry. I worked my way from the very bottom in IT and worked in field service. I worked on the help desk. I did workstation administration, network administration, security administration, protocol analysis, network management, and ultimately next-gen firewall systems engineering. It is a field where you can do anything you want, however you want to do it. There's so much flexibility in the world of IT. So how do we get people involved and get them into this amazing world that not only provides you with a challenging job, something you can really enjoy, but it also pays quite nicely and is able to give you and your family the things they need? And I think that's probably the biggest hope that we have for you, is that you're able to take this information and really supplement it, add to it, and continue that process throughout your career. That's what we are focusing on. So we're super proud of the plaque. It is going to go up on the wall so that we know that it's there, but it's not something that we're going to rub our hands on every day and say, thank you, plaque, for what you've done. This is really something you have done. We're just going to keep making videos and keep doing what we're doing so that you will continue to have these resources available and continue to grow in the world of IT. So with that, thank you again for that. It was something that is not something that got by me. It's not something I'm missing. It really is thanks to you for that. So I can say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so many times, and we really do mean it. So thank you so much for all of that support. Let's do some more Q&A, but this time, let's have you ask the questions of me. So I'm going to my Q&A board back here. We're going to go through the questions that you have submitted and see if there's some questions that we can do on here. So a lot of you were asking, this is a big question that comes up from time to time. So I want to at least, it came up even in the chat room very recently. So let's focus on this question, kind of get it out of the way. I'll give you my perspective of what we're doing here, so at least you have an update of where things are going. This is from Big Chuck. Hey, Big Chuck. What's up, dude? Big Chuck says, can't do the voice, got certified in A+ last year, thanks to you. Going to get Network Plus certified this year. Good idea. Your A+ practice tests were huge in helping me pass the exam. I was wondering, along with many of you in the chat room, if we'll have N10-009 practice tests soon. No pressure. I understand how much work it is, how busy you are, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so this is probably goes into our frequently asked questions bin. This is one we get all the time because we do have practice exams book for A+ Core 1. We have a practice exams book for A+ Core 2. We have a practice exams book for the N10 or the SY0701 Security Plus exam. And then we don't have one for Network Plus. It is a glaring omission. Where is it? And when are we going to get it? That is probably one of the most valid and timely questions you could ask. And it's a great question because we need one. We have this philosophy here with our content, with our training materials. We know how important these certifications are. We take them very seriously. Not everybody in the world takes certifications seriously for whatever reason. They have their reasons. We don't have that philosophy here. Our philosophy is this is a game changer. This is a career changer. This is a life changer. This is your career. This is your family. This is your relationship with other people in your family. This goes well beyond the scope of technology. And because of that, each one of the training materials we create, we consider to be incredibly important. We do not skimp on anything. Our goal is to make the highest quality training materials we possibly can. We want them to be the most accurate. We want them to apply 100% to the existing exam objectives. We want them to be timely. We want them to be credible. We want them to have some application in the real world. Crazy talk, I know. So it's important that when we create something like course notes, videos, practice exams, or anything else, that it really is something that is valuable, not just from a technology perspective, but it's also very accurate. This is an important part of what we do. It's a watchword of how we work. Not everybody creating content is this way, unfortunately, but we're not following their lead. We're doing things the way we want to do it. So back to okay, enough of that. Professor Messer, where's your practice exams? The answer is, and when are they going to happen? When are you going to have them? We would love to make some Network Plus practice exams. I have outlined exactly what I want to put in the Network Plus practice exams book. It's really a time motion study issue. It is all about the number of hours in the day. And although that is a project that we know we want to complete, it's not something that's going to happen in the next 3 months. But it's very possible that this year you will finally see a Network Plus book. That is our goal for this year. I had to set a set of goals for 2025. That's on my list of goals. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to happen because sometimes life gets in the way, but I'd really, really like to get one for Network Plus. I really would like to have one. I think they are valuable tools. I think we can use them in our study groups. I think people can use them to plan and study for their certifications. And one of the things you've probably seen with our A+ and our Security Plus practice exams books is that we designed them to have a very common look and feel to the actual exam experience. Not actual exam questions, because I write all of the questions original. These are not situations where you're doing anything unethical or something that would get you in trouble. I write these all as original questions, so you know there's no problem there. The part that is important, though, is the questions need to have something familiar about them when you go to the exam. They need to have a similar context. They need to have a similar tone, a similar style to actual exam questions. And that's what we try to focus on. So we don't have practice exam questions for Network Plus at the moment. We do plan on creating some, however, and I think it's going to be a banner day when I'm able to get those done. I'm really looking forward to doing, and I almost said starting the book, but technically speaking, I've already started it. It's really more about finishing it at this point. And I got to tell you, that's the hardest part, is the finishing part. So we are looking forward to getting that done. Networking, it was a big part of my career. It was a massive part of my career. I have been in some of the biggest data centers in the world with some of the biggest companies doing firewalls, network analysis, looking at their protocols, understanding the traffic flows on their networks. Networking's right in my wheelhouse. So I'm looking forward to creating it probably just as much, I wouldn't say more than most of you, but certainly just as much. I would love to see that available. So that's some of the inside baseball, some of the plans of things that we're looking at on this side. Maybe that gives you an idea of when you can get that. I realize for some of you, you'll already be done with your Network Plus by the time that's released. Timing is everything, as they say. So we're working on it. We're trying to get there and trying to get something out, but it is an important part of what we are planning on. So thank you for asking the question. Hopefully that's giving you some idea of what's going on behind the scenes, but just keep an eye out for it. And don't worry, keep asking for it. You're not hurting my feelings. You're not getting anyone upset by asking. There's nothing wrong with asking, reaching out and saying, what's the latest? I'm happy to provide that info. So thank you for the question. Other questions you have. We'll keep going through this list. A lot of great questions coming in. By the way, it's the link on your screen that you can use to submit a question at any time. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Feel free to have a look at submitting your question by using the tabs at the top of the screen. Let's keep going through this list. This is a good question because it's one that comes up from time to time. This is from Alex, who says, what application, software, or home labs would you suggest for someone to use or do while studying for the Network Plus? Now, this is probably that for those of you that have been on our website before, on our live streams before, we have the Professor Messer WRAP formula, the WRAP. The WRAP formula is one that should help you understand what resources would give you the best possible chance for passing one of these certification exams. So each one of those stands for something. The W is watch. We want you to watch videos so that you can see someone performing these commands in real time. You can understand what the output of these commands are. A video training course is incredibly important, so that's your W. R is you need to read a good book. Books are able to give you information in a different way than a video. And I think having that combination of the written form and the video form is a good combination. It's a good 1-2 punch. So that's the W and the R. The A is we want you to apply what you have learned. We want you to get some hands-on labs. We want you to pop open a browser window. We want you to do some home labs. That really helps take the concepts you've learned in the lectures and from the book and really apply them, because I really think that teaches you in a different way. And then finally, the P is we need to practice. We need Q&A. We need some type of practice exams. Well, for Network Plus, I do still have options for practice exams. Don't worry, they're on my site. We just don't have a Professor Messer practice exams book, but maybe we can make that happen. Maybe if you're watching this on replay a year from now, this will no longer be an issue for you. Just check the website and you'll know for sure. So the third one in that WRAP, the A is apply. Apply what you have learned into hands-on labs, working at a home lab, or doing something like that. So this fits into that particular part of the formula. I think there are a lot of different things you can do. At a bare minimum, you can use the exam objectives. In fact, let me pull up the exam objectives so we can have a look at these. And if I scroll to the back section, section 5, the network troubleshooting section of the exam objectives, section 5.5, let me go back to that page. I should probably put this up so that it is a scrolly thing. There we go. And we can really move it back from here. We go down to section 5.5. It says, given a scenario, use the appropriate tool or protocol to solve networking issues. And in this list, you could see there is a list of software tools, hardware tools, and basic network device commands. So all of these can be used for that application, that applying what you've learned type of the formula. So we've got protocol analyzers. So there's a software tool that would be great to install. Protocol analyzers they're relatively complex devices. There's a bit of a learning curve getting into a protocol analyzer. You can probably learn how to capture data from your network and display those packets on the screen relatively easy. It's a click to capture, click to stop the capture and display. The problem is interpreting what you're looking at on the screen. As I mentioned, part of my career was working for Network General and Network Associates as someone who's as a systems engineer, where all I did every day was work with network analysis tools, looking at the packets. And so protocol analyzers are incredibly valuable. So one of the great parts about our modern world is you can download Wireshark for free, install it on your device, whether you're running Windows, Linux, or Mac OS. There's a native version of Wireshark you can install right now, and you can start capturing data from the network. Now, why is this useful? Why would you ever want to do a packet capture? Well, one of the things is if you're trying to understand the flow of traffic, how traffic is getting to one machine, how it's getting back to you, it does show that at a very easy to understand level. You're able to look at MAC layer information, IP layer information, TCP and UDP layer details, and the application itself. It's effectively a graphical view, an easy to understand view of the OSI model in action. And if you have those decodes, you can now start getting into it to understand, oh, that's where the port number comes from. That's why it's important. It's right here in the packet. You can see the port numbers listed. You can see the IP addresses inside of the packet. You can see the MAC addresses going back and forth. And if the application is in the clear, you can see application level communication occurring. You can see timestamps. So you can understand when you sent this traffic, and you can understand exactly how long it took to get that first packet back from the server. That's important details because as a network professional, one of the main things that you will hear is that the network is slow. Something is slow. It's probably not the network, but something is slow. But you as the network professional, because if you have a network cable, now this is not a network cable, but if you had a network cable and you're looking at this cable and you're thinking, all right, where's it slow on this cable? Can't see it. There's no way to know. And because there's no way to know, it's the first thing to blame. That's why people will always open a ticket and say the network is slow. Well, they're just guessing because they could see a screen in front of them. The screen isn't slow to their knowledge. So it must be everything going over that wire. That's your problem. And so your protocol analyzer can tell you quite a bit about how the application is performing, how the server is performing, what the response times are. Are there any errors? Are there any communication inconsistencies or inefficiencies? You can see all of that in the protocol analyzer. That will be a day of your time. That is a great thing to learn. In fact, the more you learn about the protocol analyzer, I've often explained it to others because you're really looking at what's happening inside of the matrix. You know, that screen where all of the text is in green and it's going up the screen and it all looks like weird text, but whoever's sitting in front of that screen can see what's going on. They can interpret that data. To you, it just looks like a bunch of stuff on a screen, but they're able to see it. The same thing really does apply to a protocol analyzer. Once you start really understanding it, there's a flow to the communication. You can almost pick things out very easily just by looking at the screen. It is quite a set of skill. In fact, the more skilled you are with a protocol analyzer, the better you're going to be as a network professional because you'll be able to see everything. If somebody asks about how fast is the response time, where is the slowdown, I can see it right here. Here's the protocol decode. I took a capture at the user's workstation. I took a capture at the server. Let's look at the numbers because the packet capture doesn't lie. That's a great one to do. Another one you might want to consider doing is running something like a packet tracer. Packet tracer sounds like a similar thing. It's actually a tool made available by Cisco as a Cisco learning tool, but it can also be used as a very generic network learning tool. I would say packet tracer is probably a little out of scope. It's a lot out of scope for the Network Plus exam. But if your goal is to become a network professional and do a lot more with switch management, router management, and network design and network troubleshooting, that's a very useful tool to become familiar with. So packet tracer is also free. You do have to register. I guess it's registerware. You have to register on the Cisco website, but that registration doesn't cost anything. They don't make you submit any information or give a credit card or any nonsense like that. You just give them your information. Make sure you use a name and email address that's correct because they're going to send you messages back. And you have to create a login because when you log into Packet Tracer, that's what you're looking for on the Cisco website. So that's your Google Cisco Packet Tracer. That's a great one to download. It also has a very high learning curve, probably even higher than a protocol analyzer in many ways. But it is a useful tool that allows you to build a network of devices and send data across that network. You can even do kind of a bullet time. You can stop time with Packet Tracer and then watch the packet go from device to device to device to see exactly how it is changing as it goes through the network. A fantastic learning tool. And somebody, in fact, we were talking about this in our Discord yesterday, and somebody said, well, it would be better if you had a physical switch and router, but Packet Tracer still is pretty good. I actually think Packet Tracer is much, much, much better than a physical switch or router, because it is, to anyone working on a switch or router, it has the same look and feel as working on an actual switch and router. It has very few of the commands are missing in there, and if the ones that are missing, you will never miss them. The thing about Packet Tracer, though, is you can build out a network in a minute, make some changes, delete the whole network, and build it out in a different way in another minute. You can never do that with physical devices, because you have to go to the physical device, you have to unplug everything, you have to plug into your serial connection, you have to configure the device. There's so much you have to do on a physical device that slows everything down. Being in the virtual world of Packet Tracer can speed things up a huge amount. But also, as I mentioned, you have functionality that you don't have in the real world, like stopping time and watching the packet in slow motion, putting it through that step mode where you can watch everything as it goes through the line. A lot of fun with that. Packet Tracer, I could spend all day in Packet Tracer doing interesting things. But as I mentioned, a little bit out of scope for the Network Plus, but sometimes going a little bit beyond the scope can really help you bring everything back to understanding why switches are important, why routers are important, and those types of things too. That's a good one to work through. And yes, you're not breaking your own network, so that's good as well. That's always something good. You can test and try and experiment and plug and unplug and do different things. Turn off a router, see what happens. Turn the router back on, see what happens. You can create redundant links. You can break a link and see if it works. So many great labs you can do in there. That's another one you might want to do. And then thirdly, if you want something that's more real world or something that's right now in front of you, that's not a virtual world, you're not capturing things that are already happening, maybe you want to build your own firewall with your own firewall rules. And there are some great open source firewalls out there that you can use. Pardon me, I missed my mute button there. I have a new audio configuration here, and I used to have a button right there that would stop that. Well, it's not there anymore. So now I need a new button. So one of the things I say is to get an open source firewall. Get pfSense. There's other open source firewalls out there you might use, but pfSense, I think, probably is one that is so well supported, not only on different websites, but from a different development perspective as well. Build your own firewall. Plug in and work with your own pfSense firewall, because pfSense has IPS functionality you can add to it. There's plenty of reporting built into it. You can have the firewall rules there. One of the things I often tell people, and an important part of this, is when you're building out these home labs, you are effectively creating stories that you're able to tell when you finally get to the point where you're interviewing. So telling a story about the first time you installed Wireshark, you plugged into your internet connection, maybe even plug into the internet connection on the outside of your firewall, and you're watching attacks occur in real time to your firewall interface. Those are great packet captures, by the way. In fact, it would be great to have those captures in some form that you could show someone when you go to that particular interview, when they ask you, what is a challenge that you had with troubleshooting a network? What is something interesting that you're able to find on your network? And having that packet capture and say, look at what I see. Here's a bot that's doing this. Here's a worm that's on the network. Here's a capture. Here's a packet that describes that. That's valuable. Same thing with building out your firewall. Well, I built my own pfSense. I plugged it into my network and I had it start reporting on every attack that was coming in on the internet side that was being blocked before it got into my local network. Look at this report. Now you've got a report that you could show in an interview. These are great stories. And who wouldn't be interested in seeing, well, let's see who's attacking you. Let's find out. And here's the report. Well, I got this many attacks of this. The second I plugged it in, I got 100 attacks doing this. Here's another somebody trying to do an SSH attack. There's going to be plenty of attacks come into your system. Trust me. This is not going to be hard for you to create a report on all of these attacks that are inbound. Whenever I worked for Palo Alto Networks as a systems engineer, one of the things I would do we would go to a customer site and they were thinking, well, I don't know if I want this firewall or not. I say, well, let's plug it in, have it start collecting data, and let's go to lunch. Because I got to tell you, nobody likes having a sales meeting more than having lunch after the sales meeting. So that was a big part of it. So we go to lunch, then we'd come back and we just spend 30 minutes. Let's look at what we gathered. I knew that we were already gathering information after 5 minutes. The lunch was just a bonus. But having the ability to go through and instantly get reports on here's how many attacks would have been blocked while we were at lunch. Here's how many people were using inappropriate software on your network while we were at lunch. And here's what they were looking at. These were uncomfortable meetings sometimes a little embarrassing meetings sometimes. And there have been a couple of times in those meetings where they've said, excuse me, we'll be right back. And they went off and the person who was doing that suddenly was no longer with the company just because we plugged this device in and went to lunch. But that's the reality of cybersecurity and IT security in our modern world, is that we need to be able to protect these companies. And if somebody's doing something that violates the terms of their user agreement with the organization, that is probably a career limiting move. So all of that can be very valuable. Being able to show those reports are something very tangible, and it helps explain that you really know this technology. You're comfortable with it, and they're going to ask you, did you run into problems installing it? Oh, yes. Let me tell you about my problems. The more you talk about problems, you would think that would be at first you would think that would be a negative. Ooh, I don't want to talk about problems. No, I'm an expert in this. I don't want to tell people I ran into an issue. But the only time you ever learn, not ever, but one of the most useful learning features, things you will ever go through, is troubleshooting a problem. And it's what you do every day. Very often, and you've probably been in an interview where they said, tell us about a time where you had a problem and what you did to resolve it. You should be ready. You should have that one in your back pocket. Oh, let me tell you about a problem I had installing pfSense. I installed it in Linux, or I installed it in Windows, and I installed it in this system, and we plugged it in here, and it gave me this error, and we had to make a change to the networking configuration to put it on a separate VLAN or to redirect the traffic. You need to tell the story. You need to tell how you broke it, or you couldn't get it to work, and how you fixed it. Nobody's going to look badly upon you because you did this. You're the one that got it working. You're the one that fixed the issue. Now, if you didn't fix it, you probably shouldn't talk about this problem, but that is a great story to have. And you should have 3 or 4 of these stories ready to go. Oh, you should see what happened the first time I plugged in Wireshark. You should see the report I created the first time I plugged in pfSense. You'll never believe the problems I ran into just installing this to begin with, but we got through it and here's how we did. Those are very, very useful things to bring to the table. Whenever you are in an interview, you're the one who has to talk. I don't know if you've thought this through yet, but the people doing the interview don't want to be talking. They're going to ask you a question. You should just run with it. You should be in control of the interview. And one of the best ways to be in control is to have plenty of great stories to tell. And one of the best ways to have stories is to build out some of these home labs. Hopefully that can give you some things to try. And maybe something, there's plenty more you can think of. In fact, if you want to build out your own Active Directory infrastructure and connect a bunch of devices together and have your own DNS server configs and build out a separate DHCP configuration, there's another story. So there's plenty of places you can go on the internets, on the YouTubes, and it will be able to walk you through a number of different scenarios. Find something that interests you and install it. Run it in a VM. See how hard it is to really get up and running. And if you run into a problem, make sure you document it. Make sure you make a note of it so that you can tell the story about it later on. Let's keep going with the list of things. Thank you for submitting that question. That's a valuable set of things that can really get you through these very challenging interview situations. You need to be ready for those. Interviewing is its own. We should probably do a whole series on interviewing. It's its own science. Just getting the interview, how you manage the interview, what you do after the interview. These are all important skills. And none of it is really technical. None of it has to do with your knowledge of protocols. None of it has to do with routers or switches or Ethernet. It all has to do with how you handle a particular situation. And employers are looking at that. As a former hiring manager, that's something we definitely look for. We want to have a good interview with you. I've mentioned a number of times, there's an SE manager I worked with back in the day at Palo Alto Networks. We were systems engineers for a firewall, but he would start the interview with a single question and ask, tell me everything you know about ARP. Now, you would think that's a pretty short conversation until you start thinking about it. And of course, the address resolution protocol is important. What about proxy ARP? What about gratuitous ARP? What about inverse ARP? Some of these things we don't use anymore, but they are ARPy. They are about ARP. ARP is used in many different scenarios. When would you use when would you use a gratuitous ARP? It's a pretty important thing to know in the world of networking and security. We don't really talk about it in Network Plus. I think we used to. I probably somewhere down the line, I recall creating content for gratuitous ARP. I just don't think I've seen it in the most recent versions of this. You'll certainly run into it in higher level networking certifications. But that was a great question, I think, because depending on how much somebody talked, if they talked about just ARP, then they have probably a very high level view of networking. But if they then talked about proxy ARP, gratuitous ARP, well, okay, they've probably done some redundant network configurations. They've probably done some NATing. They've probably done VPNs, because some of these ARP methods are used in those particular scenarios. And from there, you can start going different places. Well, tell me when you used a gratuitous ARP. Tell me what configuration you handled a proxy ARP. Tell me about, so you can really start going through the different scenarios there. Tell me about an ARP. I've used ARP as a reconnaissance tool. How can you use ARP as a reconnaissance tool? I'm glad you asked. Let's talk about it. So you could do an entire interview just on ARP, and he knew that. And he wanted to see how deep somebody could get into those weeds, because some of those technologies, especially on the next-gen firewall side, we use all the time, and they are important for you to know. So it's a good way that he could sift out the right people and the wrong people. He could figure it out, start categorizing what people happen to know. So that was a good one, I thought. So again, get your stories together. Get your knowledge of these technologies together. You may be asked about it in an interview. Okay, let's see if I can talk just a little bit more. We're doing great on time. We got a few more we can fit in here. Let's keep going through this list and see what options might be available from you. I've got, since we talked earlier about continuing education unit credits, this is a question specifically about this. This is from Phil. Phil says, just passed the A+ Core 2 last month. Congratulations. Can I use the CEs from Network Plus and or Security Plus, these live streams, to use for my A+? Well, I'm not going to give you a quick answer, but I want to tell you where to go to get the answer for this one. So I'm going to quickly head over to the CompTIA website. Go to CompTIA.org. And then you've got Chris Evans is right there on the main screen. There he is. I'm not sure who that was. Here's someone else walking down the hallway. So you got these folks here at the very top of the screen is continuing education. There they are. The continuing education that's there has a lot of different options here. Why would you renew? What is the overview? How to renew? Continuing education fees, et cetera, et cetera. Your question was very specific about, can I watch the Network Plus live stream and use those CEUs towards your A+? So let's do this. Let's go to continuing education units. In here, You can see there's a lot here. You need 20 to renew A+, you need 30 to renew Network+, you need 50 to renew Security+, you need 60 to renew Pen Test Plus and CISA+, and then you need 75 for the higher level security ones and the Data X. Those are the expert level that have the X at the end of them. Everything else is the plus level. You're working up, you're getting there incrementally, and then finally you're at the expert level. So you have worked on the A+ certification. This tells you how to earn the CEUs, and then they tell you the relevance. And this is the important text for the question that you asked. It says, at least 50% of the course content must relate to one or more of the exam objectives for the certification that you're renewing. Let's just take that. So if you have taken the A+, you've earned your A+ certification. Now you're watching the Network Plus live stream, our study group, and you know that I give out a Network Plus 1 hour webinar category CEU. So the question is, did any of the content we went through during that first hour, did any of it, or did at least 50% of it, relate to one or more of the exam objectives for A+? Well, one way that you could tell would be to look at the exam objectives for A+. So let's do that real quick since we've done a little bit of exam objective things. I've got my A+ exam objectives right here. I thought I did. If I click the right button, I have my A+ exam objectives right here. Nothing like doing a real-time breakdown. And in the objectives, I'm going to pull up the objectives for the Core 1. For this particular scenario, anything in Core 1 or Core 2 would apply. So these are the objectives for the 220-1101, the Core 1 exam of the current A+ version. And Section 2, is networking. Notice there's a whole list of port numbers. There is hardware, there's protocols, there's hosts. It looks like at least 50% of the networking content that we've talked about in that first hour of our study group applies to at least one of these particular exam objectives. So the quick answer for you, the very slow answer for you for this particular question is, yep, we can absolutely use a Network Plus Study Group CEU and apply it back towards your A+, and that's why. So absolutely, you can apply that from the Network Plus Study Group. And because we'll do this again, back to the course notes, I'm going to go to the course notes for the Core 2 exam. This is the other A+ exam. Because you asked about Security Plus, guess what? There's a whole domain on security. So our entire Security Plus study group is about security, and I guarantee you that we hit one or more of the objectives that are listed on the A+ Core 2 in the security section. So absolutely, you can use those study groups. Both the Network Plus and the Security Plus study group also can be used towards the A+. So to renew your A+ certification, not a problem at all. The only thing that's important, and let me see if I can find this very quick on the CompTIA website, because they've changed this sort of recently. And I want to say this is right here on this screen that says documentation. You'll need to provide documentation for the following activities to receive your CEU. Now, what you are doing right now is, I believe it's completing training and higher education. I think we fit into that category. And in fact, it does say attend a live webinar. That's what we are doing right now. I hate the term webinar, but that's where we live. That's how we are. That's what it's called. So one of the things that they have recently said is that you have to submit the following documentation to receive CEUs for a webinar. You need a detailed description/outline of the webinar content, and you need a completion certificate or registration email containing your name, the name of the webinar, the date of the webinar, and the number of hours. We, of course, provide that in our email that we send back to you, so you have that information. also interesting is they say on-demand webinars and YouTube videos. On-demand webinars and YouTube videos, so this would be after the fact. This would not be live. This would be one, if you're watching this on a replay, this is what applies to you. These are only valid for CEUs if you can provide proof of registration or completion certificates. That's why I give you those super secret code words during the live event. And if you're watching this on the replay, you can perform that same set of processes I gave you during the first hour with the same super secret code word. You send me the same email, I send you back the same type of email registration. So this applies regardless. So I always tell people, just send me the information. Let me get an email sent to you, and then you always have an email that documents that you were here, just in case they happen to come back to you and ask for a little more information. Occasionally, they will audit these to make sure that you really did attend that live stream. And having that email not only documents that you were here, but I digitally signed the email. So you're able to verify that nothing has been changed in this email. Professor Messer really is the person that wrote this email, and nothing in this email was modified. It really did come from Professor Messer. He really does say that I was there, and this really is a legitimate certificate. So that's a great way to certify that you were indeed here with just a simple email. So that's my recommendation to you. Make sure you do that. They're getting a little more particular about auditing. I've noticed lately, I'm getting a few more emails from folks in the field who are telling me that, oh, I submitted these and they sent it back to me. So that's a really good example of how we want to be sure that you have all of the right documentation so that you can renew your certification if you are indeed using CEUs for renewal. Let's keep going through other questions that you have. Some other folks are chatting. A lot of good questions here, by the way. Of course, I'll remind you can submit a question anytime right here at professormesser.com/QA. Lots here to go through. So this is, let's keep going through, since we're talking about certifications and how they work with CompTIA. We've talked about the renewal process, but we've really not talked about the mechanics of the renewal process. Karab asks, is there a subscription fee that I pay for my CompTIA certs annually? If yes, do I pay for each certification? How does that work? Because you can imagine if you got the A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus study group, do you now have to renew all three of them to have this? Now, fortunately, no. That's your quick answer is thankfully, no. CompTIA does not require you to have individual CEUs. I'm going to go back to the CompTIA website under the renewal part. There it is. So for continuing education part, rather. And one of the things they talk about is why you need to renew and how you renew. Let's go to the learn about the renewal process. I think it's there. And it talks about how you renew this and what this is about. Now, fortunately, you only have to renew the highest level certification. And then once you renew that one, it renews everything underneath. So if you have the A+, the Network Plus, and the Security Plus, I'm going to click on, no, it's the CE course. Let me go through the completing an exam and getting through this. I think there's a section in here I've got to find for this other piece. But the important part is if you, let's say you have all three of those certifications, you have the A+, you have the Network Plus, you have the Security Plus, all you have to do is renew Security Plus. Once you renew Security Plus, Network Plus, and A+ is all automatically renewed. That makes it easy. Makes it simple. You can focus your efforts on that one thing, which makes it very, very simple. So make sure you have a look at this entire section for continuing education on the CompTIA website. There's a lot of information here, I realize. I mean, there's huge amounts of content here, and you really have to parse it out. But it is valuable details, and if you are working to renew your certification, that can be an important thing to consider. Another question, this one's in the chat room from Taylor, who says, I've been actively studying, going through the course videos for Network Plus, but the older version, the N10-008. Well, now that the N10-009 is the only version available, what's the difference between the two? Well, I'm glad you asked. So if you go out to the Professor Messer website, here we are, and you go into the Network Plus section, there's only the N10-009 on the main page, and you go to this section that says Start Your N10-009 Network Plus Studies here, once you get through all the ads that pop up. I give you this is one page that effectively lists all of the resources available for the N10-009 on my site. So you've got a list of all those here. But at the bottom are a set of frequently asked questions. And one of those questions is, Taylor, what are the differences between the previous N10-008 exam version and the updated N10-009 version? And I say, well, there's quite a bit that's changed. And here is a link. I wrote an article on my site that details all of the differences between these two exams. You've got a chart that breaks down for you. This Gantt chart gives you an idea of when the N10-008 was available and when the 009 was released and when we expect this to be however long to be available. But to your question, you were asking about what's changed. So if you keep going down, I have a view here. What good is an article if you don't have a Venn diagram? So here is the N10-008 exam. Here's the N10-009 exam. And I break down for you a number, well, maybe too many statistics, but that's how I work. So that is a breakdown. But if you really wanted more spoon-fed, here's what's really different. I tell you, here are all the topics that were dropped from the N10-009. So I go through the N10-008. Here's all the stuff that was removed from the N10-009 exam. Well, if they removed all that stuff, they had to add something, right? They sure did. What topics were added? Here's all the topics that were added, or a big summary of the topics. It's not a 100% comprehensive view of this, but it gives you a very good overview of things that were added. So there's the list of everything added, broken out by domain. There you go. So that is, and then we give you an idea of where you can go to get the N10-009 content. So if you're trying to break that down, it's on my site. You could also Google what are the differences between the N10-008 and the N10-009 with Professor Messer, and it will take you right to this page that will give you everything you need to know about those. I just finished one for the older network, or excuse me, Security Plus. I hope to have that one up this week. And the A+ exam is changing here in the next number of months, probably next quarter, next 3 or 4 months. So there will be an updated one of those same articles available for the A+ as well. So hopefully that gives you something you can work on. If you are working on the N10-008 and now you've got to shift gears to the N10-009, what is really different? Sometimes people will say, there's not that much that was different. I say, well, you might want to look at that one. You might want to put those two exam objectives next to each other, which is what I did. I have a big spreadsheet with every single exam objective. I looked through, was it dropped? Was it added? And then that's how that particular document came about, as we just created the details of that all in this breakdown. Hopefully that gives you a perspective of what has really been changed. Did anything really change? If you look at some of the articles out there that I saw comparing the two, 5 or 6 things changed. No, how about hundreds of objectives changed between both of those? So it's important to know what those differences are. I realize that's very detailed. It's very down in the weeds, but we're trying to earn this certification. We're going to get into the weeds. So hopefully it's given you a perspective of that. I know we're at the top of the hour. Let's get through a couple more questions, though, because for some reason my voice is still holding out. So I think that would be good. This is a popular question, and let me kind of break down philosophy for you of what we do with this. This is from James, who says, what is the success rate for those who take your course, then go on to take the exam, both Network Plus and Security Plus? Now, I would love to have these numbers for you. I, more than anyone, would love to have this information. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, depending on how you look at this, I think it's fortunate, I don't have these statistics. In fact, it is impossible for me to know this information. What kind of site are you running here, Professor? What kind of you don't even know how many people take the course and then take the exam and if they're successful or not? I don't. And that's because I don't have a registration system. I don't put anything behind a paywall. I don't require you to sign up for anything. I don't keep sending you emails every day unless you want the weekly pop quiz question. I don't track you. That is kind of a watchword for what we have done so far. Maybe we'll change that in the future, maybe, but I don't want to be blocking your process. I don't want to get in the way of you learning this information. And if I was to put a registration process in, if I was to track what you were doing, that would require I at least knew what you were doing and how you were doing it when you took the exam. If I required you to check in when you were taking the exam, these are all blocking you from learning what you need to learn. And that was not the philosophy we wanted to follow when creating our courses and creating our website. We wanted this to be as open and available as possible, even if it meant that we weren't going to get some of those metrics. I think those metrics are valuable. I think that if someone was interested in what we were doing and wanted to verify that what we were doing was good, that they would want to see that. But we also, if I want to turn that around a little bit, you don't need those statistics. If you want to know if our course is any good, go watch the course. It's free. You don't even need to register. You don't even have to give me a fake email to get a fake message on an email that you no longer use. You don't have to go through these horrible processes that sometimes you have to do just to get access to data. Instead, you go watch it. That's what I tell people. How can you really verify this is any good? Because you can go watch it. Go watch the first video. Then tell me, is that any good? And go watch the first video on the overview of the course, because I think that gives you an idea of our philosophy of what we are doing and how we are doing it. And then go watch a couple of the videos. They're not very long. You can get a feel for the quality of the video, the quality of the audio, the quality of the content. You can understand, maybe watch some of the ones where we're doing some demonstrations and see if you can follow along. There are ways that you can evaluate that. And indeed, many people like the course, watch the course. I get emails from folks all the time, and they say, I watched your course, I took it, I passed, thank you. And I really probably need to do a better job of putting more testimonials out there when people do that, because that's some great feedback for all of you. I see it all the time. I think you should see it too. But the other thing that I think is useful, if you start looking at that, these are not our statistics. This is what other people are saying. So I think that's the benefit, is that I don't need those particular statistics, because you can already see the value because it's right there in front of you, and nothing is preventing you from gaining access to those. So that's what I would do. And some people, in fact, in chat room have even said, and other people said before, you need some formalized process to have people submit their results and taking the exams. Right now, the emails that we get that we do not solicit in any way, and you're more than welcome to send them. I love reading them. I love getting the stories of your successes. Sometimes you send me a story where there's a challenge. How can we get over this hump? So here's some things you can try. We have ways that we can maybe focus your efforts in different ways, different tips and tricks we can try to get you more intel on the exam, what ways that you could evaluate the exam results when you get them. Those are important things as well. But I think that if you wanted to know, is this a good course? There are plenty of people, not just look at the number of people on. This is another great example of how you helping us with our YouTube subscription numbers. Look at the subscription numbers. If it's good enough for 1 million subscribers, maybe it's good enough for you. But I also recognize that everybody learns in a different way. Maybe my style of training course fits your style also. Maybe it is something you really like watching. But maybe you like the style of someone else. Maybe you prefer reading a book. Maybe you like all hands on. It's up to you. So we're not telling you that you have to do anything. You don't have to absolutely do a particular task. You don't absolutely have to watch the videos if you don't want to. Find the tools that work for you. I think our RAP formula is a good one. Watch some videos, read a book, apply what you've learned with some labs, and practice with some practice questions. You could do all of that on the Professor Messer website. You could do all of that on another website, but it doesn't matter either way. Just do those things. That is your formula. With some people, they need all 4 of those different components in the formula. Some people only need 1 of them. Some people prefer 2, maybe 3 of them. But you get to make that decision, and you find the resources that work best for you. And I think that's the best thing I can provide. Much better than any statistics, any metrics, any tracking that would be done. I think that's a better and more real-world approach to understanding if this is a course that really fits what you're trying to do. Let's keep going through this list. I have more to go through. Well, I know we're at the top of the hour. I don't have tons more, but maybe we can fit one more in here. There were a number of questions I got about N10-008 to N10-009. I showed that document that I had, the article I wrote with those differences. Great stuff in there. Go back to that article. I think that's going to help you quite a bit. If you can't find the article, or your Google Foo didn't work the way you were expecting, just let me know. We'll figure it out. I'll point you right to it. You can always find it in our frequently asked questions on that start page for the Network Plus. And let's keep going out. Lots of good stuff. So many good questions. I can't even get through all of them this month. You're submitting so much good stuff. Let's keep going. I know probably half of these are, where's the practice question? So I'm sorry, we're sort of skipping over those again and working through those, making it happen. Okay. There's some good stuff in here. You know, this is probably a good one to go with. We'll do this in this view of thing. One moment. In this view of things. So this is from Don, and this is one that kind of hits me and many of us in the industry a little bit. It says, do you see a theoretical age limit to continue IT? I was the manager in aerospace, though laid off last year due to budget. Sorry to hear that. Mind you, I'm now over 70. Is it prudent to continue seeking challenges? I suspect good chances of age discrimination at companies, ... This is really a timely question, because many of us in the industry and many people I've talked with who are working towards certifications have different scenarios that they're going through. Some people are right out of school and they're working to get their very first job. Other people may be working in different verticals. They may be in transportation. They might be in healthcare. They might be in law enforcement. They could be in manufacturing. And now they think, let's move over into the IT world. It's something they've always thought about, something that's always impressed them, something that they've always interested them. So it might be a good thing to transition into. But and this is not specific to IT. Anytime you make a change in your career like that, there are a number of challenges there. And one of those challenges is where you start in that particular market. So if you're coming from healthcare, you're probably not got a lot of technical knowledge under your belt. You probably don't have a good foundation to build on. So your first job in IT is probably going to be an entry-level position. But if you've been working in maybe technical sales, maybe you've been a salesperson and you've been selling firewalls or switches or access points. There are people that's what they do in their world. You already have a pretty good knowledge of how all of these technologies work. You talk to technical people all the time. You are very familiar with the ins and outs of IT, and you're probably pretty comfortable with the language of IT. You know, you might be in an entry-level position when you start, or you might be able to start a little bit higher to be able to kind of skip over the entry-level part of things. So there are some advantages and disadvantages for making that move. But there are, of course, financial advantages and disadvantages there too. If you're moving from an established position and now you've moved into IT, you may be starting at the bottom, and it may greatly affect your annual revenue, your annual income. So those are, of course, concerns. To Don's point about ageism, age discrimination, this is sort of a problem regardless of the industry. Doesn't matter what industry you're talking about. It's always a concern. It's always an issue. I wonder now, Could I show up at a Cisco? Could I show up at a Palo Alto Networks and say, yeah, I'm ready to be your systems engineer? Would they really want me to be in that position? Because it tends to be a lower aged demographic. So how do you compete at that level? Well, you compete with your brain. You compete in a different way. You're not competing at the same level because you, as someone who is now over 70 and been in aerospace, you have a foundational knowledge of how to work with people that is very different than someone who's just starting in the IT industry. And if you're just starting in the IT industry, this is not a slight towards you in any way. This is more about understanding the ebbs and flows of corporate culture, understanding a little bit more about how politics work within an organization. And those quite simply are skills you don't learn until you are in the middle of it, until you've watched it for a while. The other thing that we have going for us, if I can put myself in that category of people who've been in this industry for a while, one thing that you do have going for you is that you know people. This is probably one of your biggest strengths. This is your superpower when it applies towards finding a position, because you know a lot of people in a lot of different areas. I bet you know people in the IT department at the aerospace company that you used to work at. I bet you know people in IT from people at school, people at your kids' school, people at your grandkids' school, people at your church, people in an organization that you're a part of. You know, all of those folks are your networking, not your packet networking, your people networking. And people networking is very, very, very valuable. People networking is probably one of the most valuable things you can apply towards any job that you would apply for at any age. But when you are a little bit more older in this industry, you've got a little maturity behind you, you've been doing this for a while, you have a bigger Rolodex, if you will. A Rolodex was these pieces of paper that you would collect with people's names, their contact information on it. Now we have a bigger contact app database. So we always talk about that Rolodex as being valuable because it is. I think of it as more of, I have a bigger LinkedIn group, and I only add people to my LinkedIn connections that I have worked with directly. So everybody I'm talking to in that group are people that I know and people that know me. We've been at companies together. We've been at industry events together. We've put together trade shows together. We have been in customer situations together. Those are very, very valuable. Having that group of people that you can ping across, but perhaps more importantly, hey, everybody, I was laid off from this position. If you hear of anything out there regarding IT and this particular kind of job, let me know. And it is remarkable how useful that can be. We sometimes don't give it the credit it deserves, but knowing someone who works at a company, even if they are an acquaintance, is a very, very valuable thing. We want to work with people we know and people we trust, not only people we know and trust to do the job, to show up on time, to be excited about the technology, to want to learn more about the technology, but we also want people that we know we can work with. This is not always a good combo. It's not always the combo we find. Sometimes we can find good technical people that don't work well with others. Sometimes we find people that work really well with others that just can't apply the technology. So being able to know someone, not just trust that they're going to be here on time and be able to support what we're doing as an organization, but find someone that we like, that we can work with, that we can talk to. It's a very, very, very valuable thing. So I always tell people, if you're just starting in the industry, get a good LinkedIn together. And people sometimes will laugh at that and say, oh, another social media pusher. Are you an influencer? Are you trying to influence people on the LinkedIn? No, that's not the point at all. But you need some way to keep track of everybody. And that's what I use. I don't really post on LinkedIn, not that much. We do have a LinkedIn Professor Messer page, but I don't post as me. I post as the daily pop quiz or the weekly pop quiz that we're doing. I don't really put things about my career and what we are doing onto LinkedIn, but you probably want to consider doing that. If you've put together a home lab, if you've downloaded Packet Tracer, if you've just run Wireshark, what better place to tell people what you just learned? In fact, very often, employers will go search through your social media to see what you are doing. They might run across that article that you wrote about using Wireshark and what you found, about running PF Sense for the first time and what attacks you saw and the reports that you created. Effectively take all of those stories I told you to create, write an article instead of memorizing the story, write the article on the story, post it on LinkedIn, and now anyone who wants to hire you can see that. And of course, it helps you remember the story when you're sitting in front of them, so that in case they didn't see your article, let me tell you what I put. You can find this on my LinkedIn, but let me tell you the story. And then you can tell the story about that. So we do have some advantages at working in this industry for a while that I think can skip over the concerns that we might have about age discrimination and instead can focus on who we know, the knowledge we've accumulated through the years in different organizations, the relationships that we have not only in our industry, but across our industry into different companies. Maybe knowing somebody at a company isn't necessarily knowing somebody in IT. You can know somebody in purchasing. You can know somebody in shipping and receiving. You can know somebody in accounting, but you know somebody. That is valuable. And the more you're out and doing this in the world, the more you have been working, the more people you will know. So there are some inherent advantages that you can always take and use, even if you do have a concern about age discrimination and how that might fit. There's always some type of discrimination. There's always some type of concern, or even if it's something we don't immediately know about, we don't know what conversations are going on behind the scenes. So we always worry if we're older that it's age discrimination. If you're a particular gender, you're worried about gender discrimination. If you're a particular race, you're worried about race discrimination. There's always the worry, but there are also ways that we can work around those problems. And we need to use that knowledge we have and every advantage that we have to get past any concerns people have, because I think most people are pretty open-minded these days. And we can work towards that bigger perspective of how we can bring our well-honed knowledge to the table and be able to use that in wherever we happen to land. Well, I think that is probably a good place to finish up for today. I want to thank everyone for joining us. We always do have a good time on these live streams. Thank you for being here in the first hour and participating with our Q&A. Thanks for getting those questions right. And even the questions we had problems with, I think we all learned something from those. Thanks for joining us on our after show and getting those questions. And thank you for this. I know I said it before, but thank you for that 1 million subscribers. Really, really a lot of fun. We're having the best time talking about this and the stories of how we got here, because that is not something that happened in a month. It's not something that happened in a year. This is something that's happened over a 15-year period. So we're just sort of enjoying the ride at this point, and it's thanks to you. If you would like to help us and you enjoyed this video, we'd love it if you'd give a thumbs up. And since we just talked about YouTube, go subscribe to our YouTube channel, something you can do for free that really, really, really does help us quite a bit. Thank you so much for joining us. Come back next week. Next Wednesday, we have our Security Plus study group. If this is way past next week, you can always check the calendar, professormesser.com/calendar. Thank you, chat room. Good to see you. We'll see you next time on the Network Plus study group.